Today, we are sitting down with Tim Hogan, Knights Templar Grand Master, 32nd degree Mason, and a guy who was initiated into the order at age 8.
32nd degree? That's like getting a DLC for Secret Society Simulator.
Is that a real game?
Yeah, not yet. Copyright me, patent pending, all rights reserved.
Tim's family line runs deep in this stuff. His great-grandfather, 7 generations back, was General Joseph Warren, the man who initiated Paul Revere and helped organize the Boston Tea Party. His own father, the mayor of Aurora, Colorado, was involved in developing Denver International Airport. Yeah, that airport.
The horse of death, the Nazi bunker, the lizard people murals. Finally someone who knows what's under that runway.
Tim's written 7 books on alchemy and ancient mysteries. He leads expeditions into Egypt, where his group has private access to places tourists never see. The Sphinx enclosure, sealed chambers at Dendera, even the Great Pyramid itself, where he conducts actual Templar initiations.
Wow, that sounds like my Pesci family initiation when I became a maid fish.
What happened during your initiation?
I can't tell you that, human. I took an omerta.
Fair enough. Today, we're going deep. We'll cover the standard Templar history, but then Tim's going to take us into the secret history, the archaeological digs under the Temple Mount, 6 ancient arks his order claims to have recovered, a connection between ancient Egypt and the Mayans, monoatomic gold as a superconductive power source, and yes, he says the Templars possess the bones of Jesus. This one gets wild. Tim is more than an encyclopedia. He's an amazing storyteller. Let's go downstairs. Tim, welcome.
Thank you for having me, AJ.
I'm so excited because you know I've been a fan of yours for a long time.
Well, I've been a fan of yours too, so I'm super excited to be here. I'm so glad you're doing this format.
It's with all the stories that I research, the people behind them are so interesting that I thought it would be fun to have them in here. And you were one of those. When I was putting together my Knights Templar episode, I had a couple of drafts. I ran it by my community, and they said, "You need to look into Tim Hogan." So I started listening to your interviews, and I said, I don't need to do any more research. This guy knows everything about the Knights. So encyclopedic knowledge.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So what I want to do is I want to get into your personal journey in the order, then to the fun stuff. So we're talking alchemy, ancient Egypt, Ark of the Covenant, Anunnaki, which I think we can connect.
Of course.
But let's start today with the mundane, with the cover story.
Sure.
Can you walk us through 1118 to 1307?
Just general history.
Just the general history. Then we'll get into the real story.
So according to standard historians, the Templar Order was founded in 1118. There were 9 knights, started by Hugh de Payens and Godfrey de Saint Omar, 2 French knights who had been involved in a number of different things, but they ended up going down to Jerusalem. They got by King Baldwin II gave them property at near the Temple Mount at an area that's now referred to as King Solomon's Stables, and they set up an order ostensibly to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land. So these 9 knights were supposed to protect all the pilgrims in the Holy Land. So for the first 20 years. This is what was said they were doing. Now, this was more of a cover story. They were actually doing digging. They're doing what we would refer to as archaeology now.
Well, before we get there, hold on.
Okay.
Because not everybody knows this stuff.
Okay, you're right.
So they're protecting pilgrims. Can you just, and very briefly, because we want to get to the good stuff.
Sure.
Explain the commanderies, how they accumulated wealth.
Yeah, so what they would do is they would set up these commanderies throughout Europe and as well as in the Holy Land. And really where they started making money is they became a banking system where if you were going to, back then, you have to understand that Christians would travel to Jerusalem in the same way that Muslims would travel to Mecca today. So it was like deemed that once in your life you go to Jerusalem and you see the holy places where Jesus walked and where Moses was and where King Solomon's temple was said to be, and you'd take this pilgrimage. Well, it was very dangerous to travel back then. I mean, the world was full of ruffians and thieves, and if you had any money on you, of course they were going to steal it. So what the Templar Order did is they set up a thing where you could deposit your money at the commandery in, let's say, London, and you get a special note. And then when you arrived in Jerusalem, you could go to the commandery in Jerusalem, present this note, and they give you your money back, with a small fee taken out.
Right.
And so that small fee, added up. And this is really where the Templar Order developed its wealth. And because when they were created, they didn't have to answer to anybody but the Pope, it gave them a lot of freedom and a lot of latitude to do a lot of things, including associating with other religious traditions and other cultures that didn't exist in Europe. As they went into the Holy Land, there were groups like the Druze and the Sabaeans and others that were translating Greek and Roman texts, and these hadn't made their way into Europe yet. And so by having these associations with the Templar Order, the Templars were able to gain knowledge that just wasn't accessible at the time in Europe. And they learned of traditions like Pythagorean traditions and, the works of Plato and things that we kind of take for granted now that just was not available at the time. They also had to have associations with Islamic groups that were already existing in the Holy Land at the time. And while they later would get dragged into having to fight and defend territories on behalf of the church, that wasn't their main focus. Their main focus was actually establishing connections with these different traditions so they could gain their knowledge and bring that knowledge back to Europe, really to try to get Europe out of the Dark Ages. They believed that if they gained the technology and the philosophies of what they believed was the pre-civilization, the civilization before Noah.
Don't do it yet. Don't do it yet.
Okay.
Because you're going to get me excited.
Okay.
And as we get down there, you're a brilliant storyteller. So if you see me almost stepping on a punchline or stealing your thunder, slow me down.
Okay,
I'll get there.
Okay.
All right, but take us to 1307. They've accumulated wealth.
Right.
What happened?
So they've accumulated all this wealth. The king of France at the time, Philip the Fair, he needed money. He wanted to set himself up as the new war king of Europe. And he also wanted to control the church. He had already, by some accounts, poisoned one pope, assassinated one pope to try to get the pope he wanted onto the throne. He eventually got Clement V onto the throne. And then he also owed a bunch of money to the Templar Order, who they had been loaning him money, all along. But he needed more money. And he knew that they had amassed a great fortune at the Paris commandery. So what he did was in September of 1307, he issued arrest warrants that were to be implemented in October 13th, in fact, Friday, October 13th, 1307, to arrest the entire Templar Order and to bring them up on charges with the hopes of then securing their wealth. Now, the Templar Order, they had spies everywhere. They knew about this. They set up a plan where Jacques de Molay, who was the Grand Master of the Templar Order, he kind of stayed behind in Paris. They normally, had about 100,000 Templars in Paris. Most of them fled Paris. A few stayed behind to appear as business as usual.
Because the Templars had a fleet.
They had an entire fleet, yeah. And so the night before, on October 12th, 1307, the fleet disappears, along with all the wealth of the Grand Commandery of Paris. And Jacques de Molay is staying behind with a few hundred other knights. The arrest orders get implemented on Friday, October 13th. They're rounded up. This is the origin of the unlucky date of Friday the 13th.
Yep.
And then they're tortured for 7 years. I think Jacques de Molay thought that, and by the way, they also Pope Clement V wanted the Templar Order to merge with their rival order, which was known as the Knights Hospitalier. The Knights Hospitalier later became the Knights of Malta, but that's a different story. But the Templar Order wouldn't do it. Jacques de Molay wouldn't do it because they would have lost all of their freedoms that they had. And the Templars were known for trying to fight for freedoms of individuals as well. They helped instigate the signing of the Magna Carta, for example, which gave people rights for the first time in England.
God-given rights.
God-given rights, yeah. And this was talked about even in Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival, which was a book published in the 1200s, where it says the Templars were these Grail guardians. They're the guardians of the Grail. And it said, on the Grail altar, it said, if any Templar should become ruler of a foreign people, let him ensure that they are given their God-given rights. Well, this is the first time in history where it's even suggested that people have God-given rights. I mean, rights back then were said to come from the Pope or from the King, and that was it. So the fact that the Templars were fighting for people to have rights, this was bad for business for both the Pope and the King. So that's why they entered into this conspiracy to suppress the Templar Order.
So, and this brings me to a question I want to get your take on, because I heard you mention this recently.
Sure.
That kind of shocked me a little bit. I'm gonna tell the quick version of the mainstream version of the story.
Yeah.
Early 2000s, a document is discovered in the Vatican archives called the Chinon parchment.
Right. Sure.
Where Pope Clement V absolves the knights.
Right.
And I kind of assumed that was true, but you have a different.
Yeah, everyone assumes it's true, but the thing is, so Napoleon, people forget Napoleon raided the Vatican archives. Napoleon's personal physician was Bernard Raymond Fabre Palaprat, who was the Grand Master of the Templar Order underground. Napoleon himself believed himself to be the illegitimate grandson of Bonnie Prince Charlie, who was also a Templar out of Scotland. So one of the things that Napoleon was doing is he was looking for Templar artifacts, specifically when he raided the Vatican. He brought all those archives back to France, where they were sifted through at St. Sulpice. The Chinon parchment was never found, right? All of a sudden, years later, Dan Brown becomes popular talking about Templar stuff.
Yep.
That becomes this big thing, and lo and behold, out of nowhere, this new Chinon parchment is found, absolving the Templar Order. And it's being kind of sketchily verified as even being legit, and everyone just accepts it as real. But
I did.
Yeah, everyone did. But I don't believe. I think it was a later forgery.
And after I heard your explanation of it, I'm leaning your way, because it doesn't absolve the knights as much as it absolves the church.
Sure, it's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah, because the church, they sanctioned torture and accusing the Templar Order of all kinds of made up heresies that we know now are just, made up. And then ultimately in 1314, Jacques de Molay, as well as a number of other knights, Geoffrey Charnay, who was his one of his top preceptors of Troyes region, and others, they were all burnt to the stake. And the Templar, and Jacques de Molay, right before he died, he said, "Look, I do not consent to any of these false charges." And he told both Clement V and Philip the Fair that they would both join him in the afterlife within a year.
This is the curse.
This was the curse, and they both did. They both died, within a year, and which has led to some speculation if they were poisoned secretly, if they were secretly assassinated,
Right.
Which led to that. But
I think the Pope was poisoned because I think he actually died of dysentery.
yeah. So, but that was that was in March of 1314. But they were both in, like, Jacques de Molay. He was burnt just outside of Notre Dame Cathedral, and to this day there's still a plaque there where he was burned, and it's on the island there just outside of Notre Dame Cathedral.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and some people speculated that because the Templars were largely responsible for building those cathedrals.
Certainly.
Yeah, and they funded them, and they provided the manpower, and then they incorporated esoteric knowledge that they're bringing back from the Middle East onto those cathedrals.
Sure, and we can see their graffiti all over Europe.
Yeah.
So before we get into the real history,
Yeah.
can you take us through your personal experience? You're initiated as a page at age 8?
8, yeah.
What is that?
So yeah, so there's this whole tradition that was set up specifically for young people to go through this knighthood program. And I didn't know it at the time. I just was, I was participating in it. But my first induction ceremony was at age 8.
Did you know your family was so deeply embedded?
No.
You didn't.
I had no clue.
And you're
I wasn't even told till I was 18. So I had gone through this whole program, this knighthood program, where I spent 6 years trying to attain these different ranks of knighthood.
Mom, you should have sent me to this instead of the Boy Scouts, I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, the Boy Scouts were founded by Templars too. Powell was a Templar, but if you look at the old Boy Scout handbooks, they talk about how a modern Boy Scout is a Templar, basically. So, but yeah, so I went through this program. And then by the age of 18, I had attained this rank of Sir Knight within it. And along the way, I had to work on all these different things. I had to study the mysteries of the Grail, and I had to try to inculcate these values, these virtues, and trying to become a good citizen and leader in the world and all this stuff. By the time I was 18 and I had gone through this program, I realized it was all the people I was like, who set up this program? And I started looking into it and realized it was all these Freemasons and Templars that had set up this program. And so I was like, oh, I think I need to become a Freemason, So I remember I was in college at the time, and I went over to my mom's house to do laundry.
As we all do.
Yeah, right. And I said, and she said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm going to try to become a Freemason." And she said, "Oh, your both your grandfathers are Freemasons. Your dad went through that system. Your great grandparents are all involved in it. You have a long family line involved in all that." I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, it was your grandpa that put you in that program when you were a kid." And I had no clue about any of this. So she encouraged me to reach out to them, and then I found out that I had this long family lineage on both sides of my family involved in all this, going way back, and including my great grandfather 7 generations back was the martyr of the Revolutionary War. He was General Joseph Warren. He's the one who initiated Paul Revere. He's the one who set up the Boston Tea Party, and he was a Grand Commander in the Templar Order at the time. And his brother John Warren was the first Grand Master of Freemasonry in the forming United States, and his son Joseph Warren Jr. ended up marrying Elizabeth Burns, who was the poet Robert Burns's daughter. And Robert Burns was also a Templar in Scotland, And he wrote All Enzyme that we all sing on New Year's Day every year, so amongst other things. So anyhow, I had this so my middle name's Warren because that's my mother's maiden name. And so the Warren side of the family all goes back to that. And my grandfather, Hugh Warren, he was named Hugh after Hugh DePaynes.
Of course.
And, and then he had the Warren, side of it. He's the one who got me involved in all this stuff. And then on my dad's side, Howard Hogan, he was really active in Freemasonry, was a high degree Mason in Nebraska, and
And your father was a very popular politician in
yes,
Colorado.
Correct. Yeah, and he had been raised. He went through a DeMolay program when he was growing up.
Okay.
And I have all his old DeMolay stuff. And he became a Mason, and he was, and he was mayor of Aurora, Colorado, which is the 50th largest city in the U.S. So it's bigger than Salt Lake City or Philadelphia or St. Louis or a lot of major cities we think of, but he was mayor, and he was involved in all this stuff. But I had no clue growing up.
About your dad, my audience knows a lot about the Denver airport and the Masonic connection.
Oh yeah, correct.
Your father was involved in
Yeah. So he's the one who so the Denver airport was annexed from Aurora.
Right.
So that wasn't even Denver territory.
Right, it was outside.
Right, it was outside of Denver. So they annexed it, and the agreement was that Denver would get the taxes from the airport, and Aurora would get the taxes from any hotels and stuff that were set up around there. But he also helped set up the what's known as the Gaylord Resort that's out there on Denver International Airport property, and it has the convention center attached to it, and the convention center is actually named after my father. It's the Stephen D. Hogan Convention Center. So because he was all involved in all that stuff. And I have a brother-in-law who's also involved right now in the restructuring of the terminal of the airport, and then I was involved early on. There's a Masonic time capsule out there.
Oh, yes.
And it has the Braille plaque on it. And for the longest time, that Braille plaque was actually a plastic plaque. Most people don't know this. And so the secretary of my Masonic lodge, his name was Warren Glover. He passed away years ago. But he and I went out to the Denver International Airport to put the actual metal plaque on there, and so I was involved in some ways of actually dealing with that thing. And it's not alien code, and if you push the right buttons, nothing's going to open up like some people say. But it's just a Braille plaque, But
the Templars are famous for digging tunnels and hiding things.
Of course.
What's under that airport? Tell us.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I've been down under there. In fact, you can
not
find,
where the luggage is. What's under that?
No, below that. Even.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's some storage areas. There's no lizard people down there.
Oh.
There was always speculation that there was some entrance to the underworld down there. It's not really. I mean, the whole reason why that property was even selected was it was a deal made between the Denver mayor and Federico Pena, who was Pena Boulevard that goes to the airport's named after now. And it was kind of a money-making scheme for the politicians at the time.
They do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So no bunkers?
No, well, there is rumors that, and I... unofficially, shall we say.
We're off the record.
Right, off the record, there's rumors that there are bunkers down there for the president and other people should there be a calamity on the East Coast and they need to get out of that area. It's an area that they can go to and to be hidden and they continue to still operate.
We do know that there was a potential impact event years ago, and Obama was
Correct
to that airport.
That's right. And about less than 3 miles from the airport is the Space Force Base, Buckley Space Force Base, which is almost on the property. And in fact, the road that divides the two properties is the Stephen D. Hogan Parkway, which is also named after my dad. So, and then there's also a housing community too on the Denver airport property called the Highlands, and it's all dedicated to my dad too. There's a plaque there for him. So he was very involved in all that development.
He seemed like a great man, and I watched your eulogy of him online. It was really touching.
Yeah, thank you.
When did you learn all the secret history of the Templars when you were initiated? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah. Well, I learned the general history of the Templars as I was growing up. That was part of my education. But then, as I got involved in stuff, I started learning more of the secret history that was involved there. And I've tried to bring some of that forward and make it public. A lot of things that just nobody's known about. Like you look up Rosicrucian, for example, you're going to hear the same general story of, it was established in Germany, but it doesn't really, and they talk about Johann Valentin Andrea, but they don't really talk about what Johann Valentin Andrea was involved in, and he grew up in the town of Calw, spelled Calw, in Germany, and his mom was the town alchemist there, and that was a Templar. It was an underground Templar area, and that's where this Militia Crucifera Evangelica was largely based out of. In fact, to this day there are secret chapels there that have the blasons or the coat of arms of all the original members of that tradition, and they have Andrea's coat of arms there, in stained glass, and there's a whole tradition there that most people have no clue about.
Well, where did the Templars really start, and what was their original mission?
Yeah, so according to, and this isn't, by the way, I'm popularizing, I'm getting this information out there now, but it's something that's been known within the Templar traditions for a long time. The Grand Master before me, Raymond Bernard, he was a very famous historian and esotericist in Paris. And he published a book on this called The Secret Meeting in Rome, which was about his initiation into the Templar Order clear back in 1956. And in it, he talks about that the real purpose for the Templar Order was the Templar Order quickly realized very early on that there were these flood myths all around the world, and everyone had the same flood myth, alluding to the fact that there was probably a very real cataclysm in antiquity.
We're getting to the point where it's almost non-negotiable.
Right now. But like back then, I mean, it was, it was just kind of considered biblical history.
Right.
And so, but the Templars, they thought there was something to it. And that they also believed that there was a very advanced civilization that had existed prior to this cataclysm.
When you say advanced, do you mean advanced for their time or for ours?
Both.
So technology we would find advanced.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so much so that even later on, when Francis Bacon wrote his book, The New Atlantis.
Oh, yes.
So Francis Bacon was the secret son of Queen Elizabeth I. He was hidden at birth. He was given to Lady Anne Bacon, who was Queen Elizabeth's lady in waiting. And he was raised by the Bacon, Lord Nicholas Bacon, and Lady Anne Bacon. But Francis Bacon And Queen Elizabeth I was a member of this militia Cruciferia Evangelica. She was a Templar.
And that's something interesting where people think that Knights Templar are just guys on horses. But,
right. No.
But
There were women going all the way back to the beginning.
And farmers and blacksmiths and masons.
Right, exactly. Right. Yeah. It wasn't just knights on horseback. It was and clerics. It was an entire. It was the first multinational corporation, really.
Sure.
And it had men and women involved in it in different capacities. But and so even after the suppression, as the Templar Order continued to exist secretly underground, there's some very high-level people like Queen Elizabeth I that were involved in it. Francis Bacon had also been involved in it. So when he wrote his New Atlantis, the whole basis of the book was that there was this secret underground Templar body that referred to itself as the College of Solomon.
Yes.
So the head of the College of Solomon's wearing a turban with a red Templar cross on it. And they have developed all these technologies, or they're trying to develop all these technologies. And the story goes that there was this ship. It's kind of like the story of Lost, actually, if you ever watched that TV show.
The first season.
Yeah, so there's this ship that crashes on the island, and nobody knows about this island. It's like this hidden island. And when the people get off the ship, they find there's this civilization on this island, and they're totally spiritually and materially way more advanced than the rest of the world. And the people of the island explain to themselves, well, we're the College of Solomon. We develop these technologies, and we know about the whole world, but the whole world doesn't know about us. And they say to him, well, where'd you learn of these technologies? And they said, well, it's like this. We settled on this island, and then one day we saw this light out hovering over the ocean, and it was like in the shape of a cross. So we rowed our boats out to it, and there was like this force field that wouldn't let us get any closer to it. And then it spit this book out to us.
Okay.
And so we brought this book back to land, and it was a blueprint for how to create all these technologies. So we've been just trying to develop them ever since. So this is like clearly describing this UFO event,
sure.
Right? But all the technologies were believed to be technologies from the original Atlantis. And it described things like submarines and flying machines and things that, didn't exist back in Francis Bacon's day. But it was believed these were the things that the original Atlantis had, and that it was the Templar mission to redevelop these things. And to reestablish a country where they could be developed. And that's really what led to the creation of the United States, to become this new Atlantis where these technologies could be developed.
How does Francis Bacon's story track with Plato's description of Atlantis?
It's different because he's clearly sourcing back to Plato.
Sure.
But then he's also talking about all kinds of things that Plato doesn't talk about. And he talks about like medicines that need to be developed, and along with the technologies, and he just says it needs to be reestablished. The new Atlantis needs to be established.
And does that become a Templar mission?
That becomes the Templar mission.
Okay.
Yeah, and then ultimately, I mean, the United States. Well, originally the Royal Society was established in England to try to create these ideas of Francis Bacon, and then that was brought over into the establishment of the United States, which then became the main New Atlantis model to develop these things and perpetuate them.
So when the Templars they end up in Jerusalem, they're, I believe, granted permission to set up their headquarters.
Correct.
Under the dome.
Right. So this is the secret history.
Yes.
So like,
but this is why we're here. This is why.
Right. So while they're supposed to be protecting pilgrims,
right,
what they're really doing is they're digging. right? And they're doing archaeological excavation under the Temple Mount, and they're going into East Jerusalem, and they're opening up tombs and finding artifacts, and they're bringing this stuff secretly back to Europe. And then they're also going into places like Egypt, where they set up their grand commandery at the Temple of Isis at Philae.
Mm-hmm.
And from there they're going into places like the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, and Hatshepsut's temple, in the Valley of the Kings, and in Karnak, and then and they leave these Templar markers at all these places, and they leave Templar graffiti at all these places as well. And they're finding artifacts, including arks, like the Ark of the Covenant.
You said arks.
Arks,
So
plural.
Plural arks.
Yeah, so they found 6 arks. But there was probably 100 arks in antiquity. Every temple in Egypt had one of these arks, and you can see it on the temple walls when you know what to look for.
So if there were 100 arks on Earth, then how the arks are described in the Bible is incorrect?
Well, they were electrostatic capacitors, and they would be set up at certain node points around the planet, and then the electricity would build up, and it would just broadcast within the region.
And let me set up for those listening. If you take acacia wood and put gold on either side of it, you create a dielectric,
Correct.
which does transfer electricity.
That's exactly right. And then the other thing they put in the arks was this, what was referred to as mana,
mm-hmm.
which was really just gold converted into a monoatomic state, and what makes it superconductive. So you put this superconductive substance inside this, and it's going to produce a tremendous amount of electricity.
But monoatomic gold can only do that with some alchemical...
Correct.
Right, because scientists can't do this.
Correct.
But somebody could.
Yes. So the process, the Templars figured out how to do this, right? And it is weird science, because when you take gold and you convert it into this state, the first thing that happens is the gold, you break it down, but you still have gold. But at a certain point, the gold just disappears.
Well, the lattice structure of the molecules falls
Right.
away, and you're
Correct.
left with single atoms.
Well, even before that, it literally disappears into a higher dimension.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when you create the conditions for it to come back, it enters in this monoatomic state where every grain of this gold is 1 atom thick. That is the two electrons in the outer valence ring both enter into what's called a spin forward.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, it enters into a high spin state. So the nucleus completely captures the outer valence ring, so it doesn't bind with anything else.
Right.
And when it does this, it generates a tremendous amount of electricity, and it becomes superconductive.
And there are some parts of the Anunnaki legend that say they were here from monoatomic gold.
Right. Yeah, they were mining gold.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is when we see modern UAPs in the ocean. I think that's what they're doing. I think they're because this gold, it can also be made deep in the earth and pushed up volcanically, and then it gets deposited in the soil and or in the bottom of the ocean. If you look at the bottom of the ocean, it's mostly just white powder down there, which is what this monoatomic gold is. But it can be pushed up volcanically, and then plants absorb it. And so the other way you can capture it is you could calcinate down like a bush, right? Burn it down, and you can extract the monoatomic gold out of the ashes.
And that's interesting, because calcinate, that would be one of the steps of alchemy.
Correct. And
Okay.
it's also we believe, from a Templar perspective, it's why Moses witnessed God as a burning bush, right? Because you have to calcinate down the bush to extract the mana, literally out of the ashes, the monoatomic gold.
Do you remember the name of that bush, the scientific name? Because they're all over Egypt.
Oh yes, it's tamarisk. Well, there's the tamarisk, and then there's the acacia, but they're all over the area. But there's tamarisk, the thorny tamarisk, is what they say was probably the burning bush.
Right, and so there are these perennials. This is for the audience all over Egypt. That these perennials have highly volatile oils that are flammable.
Correct.
When the conditions are correct in the desert, they catch fire.
That's exactly right. And if you extract the ashes from that, you can extract this monatomic gold from those ashes. This is also, by the way, we believe why later on the Hebrew priests at like Solomon's temple were demanding all these burnt sacrifices. Because again, you can extract the monoatomics, the mana, quote unquote. And mana, by the way, mana just in Hebrew means what is it? It's literally what it means is what is it? And it's called that because if you do a spectroscopic analysis or a chemical testing with this monoatomics, it doesn't show up as anything.
Right.
So it's like mana, what is it? So take
us to back to the ark. The mana is in there.
So it's placed in the ark. Even the Bible says that there was a pot of mana placed in the ark. But if you
mana provided throughout the entire Exodus.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Moses, he also burned the golden calf into this white powder, and for centuries, scientists said, "Oh, see, this is just proof that the Bible's, ridiculous because everyone knows gold melts; it doesn't turn into a powder." But actually, if you do this alchemical process to it, it does turn into a powder. And it does not only, you can see this in ancient Egypt, on all the temples, wherever you see an ark, you'll also see the pharaoh with his hand out with this mound-shaped cone on his hand. That cone mound is the mana. It's the mana bread. And when you form the mana in the vessel, when the gold, it phase shifts into this other dimension, and when you bring it back in the vessel, it forms that exact mound shape. And so that's why they're depicting it that way. But the pharaoh would eat that, and it had incredible health benefits, in terms of curing cancer and everything else. But it was also put inside those arks, and it would produce this tremendous amount of power. And I'm certain, actually, that's why these phase shifting UFOs, these UAPs, that are phase shifting the same way that the gold does, when you do this alchemical process to it, that's what they're doing. They're mining this stuff. Because it allows them to use. And by the way, the Hebrew tradition referred to this substance as mana, right? But and it was said to, if you read texts like the Kebra Nagas, which is the Ethiopian text, that talks about King Solomon's flying craft.
And Menelik, yes.
Right. And Menelik. King Solomon's flying craft was said to be powered by this mana. Right?
But wait, there's more.
In the ancient Vedic texts, they talk about flying craft, and they're referred to as Vimana. In the Sumerian texts, they talk about the Anunnaki, these gods, having flying craft, and the flying craft are referred to as Shimana. And the Polynesian cultures that talk about like how the Eastern Island statues were moved, it was with a substance that was referred to as mana, right? In like Tibetan traditions, the white stone of enlightenment was referred to as mani. It's all the same stuff, and you find it universal. And the other unique thing that happens with this mana when you put it in, when you subject it to a weak electrostatic or electromagnetic field, it causes the vessel containing it to start to weigh less than nothing. This is really how a couple people with rods could carry the Ark of the Covenant, which would have weighed several tons.
Several tons.
You know, with all that gold and acacia wood.
And maybe it's a coincidence or maybe not, but the priests that carried the ark were the Levites.
Right.
And it sounds a lot like levitation.
Levitation.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Not that the word levitation is a Hebrew word, but I mean, you tell me where the word levitation
it's
comes
just
from.
interesting.
You know, there's a lot of root words to things that we normally don't think of as with certain cultures. For example, the word ignite.
Right.
Right. Comes from ignis, right? The Greek ignis, which meant fire. You know where that comes from?
No.
It comes from the Sanskrit agni, which meant fire.
Okay.
So agni became igni, you know, where we get ignite. You know, but like most people would never associate, they take it back to the Greek, but they wouldn't realize it actually comes from the Sanskrit.
Sure.
You know, so there's words all the time that get incorporated into words we use in English. Or the word on, for example, when you turn on a light switch, on was the ancient Egyptian word for light. So you're literally turning on
Wow.
the light, you know. And there's lots of words like that we've inherited that we don't really remember the origins of. And scholars are quick to point them back to the Roman or the Latin or the Greek. But the Greeks and the Romans, they got those from other cultures.
Sure.
Too. So, I mean, it's...
Yeah, you can see a lot of... Polynesian cultures have words with Greek roots, but there's an argument to be made that it's kind of the other way around.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 100%.
So, to the Ark, what did the Israelites think they had? What were they doing with this
Well,
box?
so we believe... This is from a Templar perspective.
Sure.
Okay, we're quite certain that the whole Moses story really goes back to you have to understand the history associated with the pharaoh Akhenaten.
Mm-hmm.
So Akhenaten was the first pharaoh to proclaim monotheism in history. He said all the gods of Egypt were actually a part of one god that was known as the Aten, or my Aten, which in ancient Egyptian was Atenai, right? When Akhenaten got deposed, because the Amun priesthood rose up and were like, hey, we're not going to do this one God thing anymore.
Right, because they worshiped Amun and the others.
Right. So they had to go underground.
Mm-hmm.
Akhenaten had a brother whose name was Tutmosis. And when Akhenaten was deposed, Tutmosis is the one that took all the Atenist followers out of Egypt, and he took them up into Phoenicia, and they really literally became the Canaanites and became the early Hebrews. And so, in words like Atenai became Adonai, which meant Lord in Hebrew. But the ark that's associated with the Hebrew tradition really was one of these arks that was in Egypt that was a power, literally was used to generate power. And we believe these arks, according to the ancient Egyptian account, these were technologies that had come from Utlant,
Right.
which was their name for what we now call Atlantis. And it's depicted on the at Edfu, at the Temple of Horus.
Yep.
There's what's called the building texts that are on the wall there, and they show the gods, the Needers, coming over in boats from the primordial mound that had drowned in the ocean as they came to Egypt to settle. And they also showed these arks on the boats being brought over. So anytime you see an ark in Egypt, one of these arks, it's always depicted on a boat. And it's because it was technology that was brought over from Utlant.
Sure.
and deposited in these temples that were then used as like power stations.
I mean, there's even that story in the Bible about Uzzah who goes to study the ark and is electrocuted.
Right, literally he kills him on the spot, because he's shocked to death. Yeah. So and that was the other thing. So the pharaohs are always depicted with these rods next to the ark because they were grounding rods.
Yes. So
you could literally put the rod in the ground, drop it against the ark, and it would ground the electricity. So then you could open it. And in the Torah or the Old Testament, these were it was Aaron's rod.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Aaron's rod was used for. Same thing. It was a grounding rod. You put it in the ground, drop it against the ark, discharge the electricity, so then you could handle the ark. But if you didn't do that, the ark would start to build up static electricity over several hours or several days, and then it would discharge through the winged figures on the top.
The cherubim,
The cherubim. And if you remember in the story, Moses, he sets up a tabernacle in the wilderness, which he did with wool curtains.
Right.
And wool is also a static generator.
That's right.
So it would help to build up that static, that would then be collected in the ark as a capacitor, which would then discharge it.
That's true. When they would send priests into the tabernacle, they would tie a rope around their legs.
Yeah, because if they got killed, they could pull them out. Yeah, so they wouldn't get electrocuted too. Yeah, so it's so the Templar Order, they found 6 of these arks.
Where did they find these?
In between Jerusalem and Egypt.
Okay,
and most of them were found in Egypt. In fact, at the Temple of Seti the First at Abydos, there's a secret chamber. It's called the Seti room now, but it's a chamber. It's closed to the public. We lead tours in Egypt, and we have access to this chamber. And what it has depicted on the temple wall is it shows Seti the First holding the manna bread in his hand next to an ark, and then it shows another ark on the boat undergoing transportation, but the ark right next to him, there's also 3 red Templar crosses that were painted by the order back in the late 1100s. That's where they found the first ark, was in that room. And that's one of the arks that they secured that we still have to this day. So
let's take a quick break, and I want to come back and talk about the arks that you found. And I'd like to get into a little bit of ancient Egypt and how they could have worked as technology.
Absolutely.
Right?
Sure.
All right. We'll be right back. All right. So the Hebrews had the arks. They probably didn't know what they were.
You're correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't understand. Well, they had a ark,
right,
for sure. And they quickly learned that it could be deadly.
Sure.
And it would probably, it would build up this power. Interestingly, if you look at around the world, and you'll see this all over Egypt, but also other places like Cambodia and in Peru.
Mm-hmm.
There's these what are known as, they're called butterfly clamps, which fit these stones together, and then there's these clamps, and it's the same looking clamp. Those weren't actually, we believe, weren't really to hold the stones together, because if you wanted to hold the stones together, it would be thicker in the center and smaller on the sides. But in these cases, it's thicker on the sides and thinner in the center. So the purpose of them wasn't, and it was metal. We know it was metal that was put in there. The purpose wasn't really to hold the stones together. They created a zipper effect around the temples, and they were like the receiving for these arcs. So as the energy was broadcasted, it'd be picked up by this metal zipper that would go around the temples, and then they could just kind of plug into that, We think that's what they were really used for.
And you think there was about 100 of them
Oh yeah, at least.
around the world?
Yeah, maybe even more. I mean, you find even to this day in Japan and the Shinto tradition, they have these arks that they bring out of their temples, once a year, and they'll parade them around the town, and they look exactly like the Ark of the Covenant.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, but it comes from the early Japanese tradition, of having these arks. So it was an international thing that I think went back to this technology of Atlantis. That when that civilization collapsed, there's certain ones that were preserved, and then later they made kind of like symbolic replicas of them. You see this a lot in Ethiopia, even to this day. They call them tablet boxes, but they.
So do you believe that the ark that's allegedly in Axum in Ethiopia?
I think it's real.
You think it's real?
Yeah, I think it's one of the real ones.
Okay.
I have no reason to doubt it. Actually, I mean that whole Ethiopian tradition there is very old.
The Kevin Nagast talks about the ark coming there.
Correct. Yeah, and it also there's one of the earliest Jewish temples in Egypt was actually on Elephantine Island, and I've been into the ruins of it's that area is closed to the public, but I've been in there.
How do you get access to all these places? By the way, Tim does tours.
Yeah,
that I am definitely going to take. How do you get access to these places?
Well, because the order's been there for the last 1,000 years doing research, and so they just give us access, because we've always been respectful. They allow us to do our initiation ceremonies in the Great Pyramid. Still, it's not a problem.
Does the Great Pyramid have anything to do with the arks?
Some believe that the so-called sarcophagus, the box that's in the king's chamber, was originally designed to hold an ark.
It would fit better than a body,
right? Others believe there is something else that's going on in Egypt. At all these temples where you find these arks, there's also talks of stargates that are and this is in the hieroglyphs on the temple walls. They talk about stargates, and that these arks were being used to provide the energy for these stargates, and that the pharaoh would go through these stargates and meet with the needers, the gods, who would instruct him, and then he would come back and pass that on to the rest of Egypt. And there were only like 7 pharaohs that were considered masters of the stargates, and Hatshepsut was one, and then her son Tutmosis III was one. Even Akhenaten, who was the great grandson of Tutmosis III, was also listed as a master of the Stargate.
I have an episode coming out at some point that's going to be controversial that alleges that Akhenaten might have been Moses.
Yeah, we think it was his brother Tutmosis.
Okay.
So Tutmosis became Moses.
Yep.
Right?
And Tutmosis II, he was just found just a couple of weeks ago.
Correct, yeah. So there is, we think, so there's some evidence that this idea of the Aten, the one god that Akhenaten talked about, was actually known by the pharaohs going back to Tutmosis III at least, and that it was knowledge that was secret amongst the pharaohs, that all the gods were aspects of one god. And it was only Akhenaten who then made that idea public. And that was where his real heresy was.
Sure, I mean, he moved the capital right from Cairo.
Right. And he set up Tel Amarna.
Yes.
And he, and then, of course, Nefertiti was his wife. The real kicker there is that there are busts of Nefertiti, the that headdress that Nefertiti is wearing is actually a Mayan headdress. And on Elephantine Island, there is a secret Tutmosis III temple there, and it shows Mayans trading beads with Egyptians.
Again, this is Anunnaki legend that after the Great Flood, the Yucatan survivors went and Egypt survivors went.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we think what happened was actually, so the Mayans, they referred to Aztlan, which was the homeland. The Egyptian temple walls talk about Utlant, which is the same place, and that we think what the Egyptians later did, so the Egyptians inherited all of this stuff, right? They didn't even know what most of it was.
They found it.
They found
Right.
it. I mean, when they found the Serapeum, for example, where there was these giant granite boxes that weigh 700 tons and are so perfectly and precisely made, the Egyptians couldn't have made that. They had copper tools.
Right, and I've seen those right angles measured with lasers.
Right, and they're precise.
Yes.
No one knows really what the boxes were for. According to early accounts, the only thing that was found in them was a white powder. Right?
Right.
So it was probably this monoatomic gold. And it was probably a survivor bunker, to preserve this stuff from the cataclysm. So when the Egyptians later found it, they were totally freaked out. We know they were because they started sacrificing bulls there. They started eating the dirt out of the temple walls because they thought it might have magical properties. I mean, these were not the technologically advanced people who made those boxes. These were the later people who found them, clearly, and were trying to process it. But we also know that the Egyptians wanted to find the original homeland of the Needers and of this tradition. And so they probably sailed in boats over to the Yucatan and met with the Mayans who had the same tradition, and we don't know how much they associated with them, but we do know, like in the Valley of the Queens, for example, there's a tomb dedicated to a Queen Maya, and there's Mayan artwork in the tomb, so there had to have been some crossbreeding going on, and it may be that Nefertiti herself was a Mayan princess. She was said to have come from a foreign land, and and that was Akhenaten's wife.
Right.
So, and then King Tutankhamun was their son. Right. And his original name was Tutankhaten, after the Atlantis. In fact, his throne says Tutankhaten on it, but he had to change it to Amun because the Amun priesthood took over at that point. So,
we've got the arks transmitting energy. I subscribe to the pyramid power plant theory.
Yeah, if you were to put one of those arks in there and turn it on, I mean, even without adding, chemicals and everything else to create that energy, as is the theory, even beyond all that, the granite in there is piezoelectric.
That's the rose granite.
Right, the rose granite. So as that pressure is put on it, it produces electricity. It's in the middle of the desert. The pyramid itself is a giant electrostatic capacitor. If you stand on top of the pyramid and you take a bottle with a wet rag on it and hold it up, sparks are going to be shooting off the top of it just because it's already building up static electricity. But then if you put an arc in the center of it with this monoatomic substance, the superconductive substance, is going to really generate a lot of power.
And you throw a gold capstone on top.
Yeah, of course. It's just going to transmit it throughout the region. And really, I think there's some theories that Nikola Tesla, when he was developing his Wardenclyffe Tower and all of his research he was doing in Colorado Springs, Colorado, he was trying to mimic this process.
Sure. I mean, he built Wardenclyffe on top of an aquifer,
Correct.
Just like Giza.
Right. Just like Giza. Yep.
Here's where I get tripped up. Is I can buy into that, the fact that there's electricity flowing around the ancient world, but what were they powering?
I think they were powering the same things we power today. I think by some accounts, the Earth was as populated and as advanced as it is today.
Wow, that's a big claim.
It's a huge claim. I'm willing to make it because there is evidence for that. There's even evidence of nuclear detonations in the ancient world at places like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, even on Easter Island. And by the way, this is something you never hear about. So Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa in India, there was a script that was found. The only other place we find that exact same script is on Easter Island, which is on the exact opposite side of the globe.
Right.
So there was clearly a worldwide advanced civilization that was going on. Harry Truman, when he wrote in his diary entry that, by the way, Harry Truman was a past Grand Master of Missouri for Freemasonry. He was a 33rd degree Freemason, and he was a Templar. And when he wrote in his diary entry about the discovering of the atomic bomb, he says, "We have discovered an ancient weapon."
I didn't know he said that.
Yeah, those were his exact words. "We have discovered an ancient weapon."
And these texts you're talking about, they do talk about a sky filled with fire.
Absolutely. Oppenheimer was a Sanskrit scholar.
Yes.
That's why when he said, "I've become death, the destroyer of worlds," that's directly from the Mahabharata.
Yes.
And books like the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, they say things like, it talks about atomic detonations. It says, Gurkha, flying his powerful Vimana, hurled a single projectile with all the power of the universe. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrishnis and Ankadas. A pottery broke without apparent cause. Elephants burst into flame and ran madly. The birds croaked madly. After a few days had passed over, all foodstuff became infected. Hair and nails began to fall out.
Sounds like radiation poisoning.
Radiation poisoning. The soldiers threw themselves in the streams to wash themselves and their equipment. Clouds roared upward, showering gravel. These were all the descriptions of this weapon. And by the way, the Vimanas were these flying craft, you know. So these are in ancient texts. These were things that the Nazis were studying, that Annerba were studying to try to develop this. And when they were developing their V2 program, that Oppenheimer, was in charge of, and then he was brought over to establish the NASA program for the
Von Braun.
Werner von Braun. Sorry, not Oppenheimer. Werner von Braun. He was in charge of the V2 program. He was brought over to develop Saturn V for NASA. But again, we're talking about ancient technology, and there is plenty of evidence of this around the ancient world, and it's mentioned in the ancient texts. So I think the world was a lot more advanced than anyone's willing to talk about. I think that there was this mass cataclysm. I mean, just like today, most of the major cities were on the coast. As sea levels rose 300 feet, it just erased everything. And then all that was left over was the myths and some areas of survival. One of the things that we point out when we go to Egypt, for example, when we do the tours in Egypt, and this is not a well-known or popular theory, but we believe that the Valley of the Kings, for example, was originally survival bunkers. Because most people think of them as just these tombs built into the cliff sides, but what they don't realize is all those tombs are connected by these tunnels that go deep down into the earth, where they're all connected. And it would have taken thousands of people to carve out all these tunnels. And if you were a pharaoh and you're trying to find a place to hide yourself where you're buried, you're certainly not going to hire thousands of workers to create a bunch of tunnels so that you could be buried down there. I mean, the secret would have gotten out right away. So we believe that from a Templar perspective, that the pharaohs wanted to be buried at the place where their ancestors originally came out after the cataclysm. And so the other thing that these pharaohs did is in their tombs, they tried to preserve the knowledge of that civilization prior to the cataclysm. And so we show, for example, in certain tombs where there's these tall men with red beards that have baby woolly mammoths and giant sloths on leashes, like
pre-ice age animal,
pre-ice age animals that the Egyptians shouldn't even know about.
No.
And there they are, carved in the tomb, being preserved by the pharaoh. Why would he want to preserve that in his tomb in that area?
Is that public, or is that something that you've seen?
It's something I've seen. I mean, I can show the photos of it, but I mean, that's one of the things we show when we go on these tours, so people can see it.
Your tour will go in there?
Oh yeah. We show it
because the Tomb of the Kings, that network theory, that's disputed. But have you seen that network?
Oh yeah. Well, they have it. They have that entire tunnel network is. They actually, when you go into the entrance of the Valley of the Kings, they have a model of it for the public to see.
Oh my goodness.
It looks like a giant ant farm underneath there. And some of them go down, 200-300 feet down into the in there. Why did they even have these tunnels for their tombs? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
It makes sense if you understand those were survival bunkers.
It makes me think of the underground city Derinkuyu in Turkey.
Same type of deal. Exactly. Yep, exactly same type of deal. And for that matter, and this is another Templar-related thing, one of the things that the order also discovered when it first went to Egypt is that there were these massive tunnel networks that existed between Giza and Saqqara. All right? Saqqara is where the step pyramid of Zoser is. That word Saqqara is actually where we get the word sacred from.
Okay.
But there are tunnels that stretch that whole way, large tunnels. That area, that underground in the ancient Egyptian language was known as Ras Tau, which just meant underworld. When the Templars discovered this, they brought that knowledge back with them, and they transliterated the Egyptian Ras Tau into the Latin language they're familiar with. So Ras became rose, and Tau became cross.
Oh my goodness!
So they adopted the symbol of the rose cross to talk about the secret underground area of Egypt. And then when they went and set up the cathedrals, when they started building the cathedrals of Europe, and they were bringing back this Egyptian knowledge, and they were trying to set up the cathedrals in the same manner of the Egyptian temples, and they put their alchemical knowledge, like you could go to Notre Dame Cathedral, the front doors of Notre Dame Cathedral, they have all the stages of alchemy depicted, which nobody knew at that time except for groups like the Sabaeans and the Druze in the Middle East. So it's very clear that the Templars were associated with them and bringing this knowledge back. But they set up the cathedrals so if you view them from the sky, they're crosses. But then they put the rose windows in them, right, to make them rose crosses.
Right.
Ras Tau, that knowledge from Egypt, from the underworld of Egypt.
So the Rosicrucians are the followers of...
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Templar order, when they created the Rosicrucian order in Germany, that symbol, the rose cross, was just pointing back to the Ras Tau, the underworld of Egypt. And this is also why they also brought over... They put the black Madonnas in the crypts of the cathedrals. This was hearkening back to the Temple of Isis, where they had their Grand Commandery in Egypt, where they had the granite or the basalt statues of Isis with the young child Horus on her lap. That was, it was black basalt in ancient Egypt. So they just recreated that image and painted it black and put it in the crypts of the cathedrals where they're holding their secret initiation ceremonies. And it was to hearken back to that origin in Egypt. And there was a lot of things like that. I mean, another example is the Baphomet, right? They were accused of worshiping this ram-headed figure, right? Well, what that ram-headed figure was it was actually the god Amun of ancient Egypt, which was where we get the word Amen from.
Yeah.
And it was a ram because it was created during the age of Aries. All that Egyptian stuff was largely created during the age of Aries. Judaism came out of that age of Aries, which is why they use all this shepherd metaphor and you'll see the rabbi with their locks that are made to look like lamb ears, and but the that word Baphomet, it actually comes from ancient Egyptian. Ba meant soul, Fa meant from, and Mat meant universal order. So it was literally the soul from the universal order, and that was Baphomet. But it was a figure of the god Amun, and he was a ram because what sound does a ram make? Ba.
Oh, yeah.
Which means soul, right? So, and you'll see this too if you go to Karnak, for example. There's a row of sphinxes. And as you're going into Karnak, you'll see all these ram-headed sphinxes because, the ram was Amun. But then they have ram heads, but they have lion bodies. And the reason for this is the lion represented the age of Leo, where the Egyptian civilization came out of.
Sure.
But then the temple was being created during the age of Aries, which was the ram. Right? So that's what they were saying. They were saying, look, we're creating this temple now during the age of Aries.
How far back would that take us?
Well, so the age of Leo was during the Younger Dryas cataclysm.
Of course. So
that's when the Sphinx was built.
Right.
Right? It was during that time.
Facing Leo
on the horizon. Yeah, so it was saying, look, our foundations that we came out of was during the age of Leo, during the cataclysm, the Younger Dryas cataclysm. We are now practicing under the age of Aries, so the god Amun is depicted as a ram for that reason, and the ram, of course, says Ba, which is the soul.
Let's talk a little bit about the controversial stuff regarding religious artifacts.
Sure, absolutely.
I've been following you for a long time. I don't think you can get away from these anymore.
No. Let's do it.
I don't know. Do you want to? I might be more comfortable you telling what you found than me putting words in your mouth.
Absolutely. Okay. Sounds good. So the Templar Order found a number of artifacts as they were digging in Jerusalem and in Egypt. They found these arks that we talked about, 6 arks in particular. 6 arks that they captured, they brought back up through into Lebanon for a while, and then into France, and into Portugal, and into Scotland. And from there, they brought them over to the New World. So they were traveling over to the Americas. They actually had, by the time the order was suppressed, by 1314, they had already mapped all of North America.
Sure.
They hid. They were trading with the Mayans. In fact, if you go to Rosslyn Chapel, which was completed by 1420,
Yeah, I do want to talk about that.
there's a stained glass window that has American corn and aloe cactus depicted on it.
Yes.
But it also has Mayan pyramids.
I did not see those.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
corn is coming out of these Mayan pyramids, right? Which shouldn't be there.
No, they shouldn't.
But they're very clearly Mayan pyramids, and it's because the Templars were trading with the Mayans. And that's a whole nother story. When we do a tour down into Mexico, we meet with the Mayans. Still to this day, they still put the equal armed cross of the Templars on their altars. And we still have the same secret grips and everything that we do. But
Well, then we have to get back.
but that's a whole nother topic. But
It is, but we need to sidetrack for that for just a second, because
Sure.
to support that theory that the Templars were trading with the New World,
Yeah.
can you tell the story about Columbus?
Oh yeah. So Columbus was he was a freelancer,
Bit of a rogue.
rogue. He caught wind of the fact that there was land on the other side of the Atlantic. To the day he died, he still thought it was India. He didn't realize it was a different culture, but he figured this out, and then he went and he pulled the daughter of one of the Templar Grand Masters out of a convent, married her to try to get Templar maps and knowledge, and then once he was able to get that, he then went to the King of Portugal and said, fund me to go to the New World. There's land across the ocean, and there are sacred artifacts and that were moved there, and I'm going to go get them for you. And of course, the King of Portugal was like, we don't need you, because Portugal was actually founded as a Templar state.
Right.
And when the Templars were suppressed, they just changed their name and continued to be the seafaring, like Vasco da Gama was a Templar Grand Master, of Portugal. So they were already still exploring all over as Templars. They just changed their name to the Knights of Christ. So
Right.
they already knew there was land on the other side. So he said, we're not gonna help you, Columbus. So Columbus went to the enemy of Portugal, which was Spain, and he sold Queen Isabella on the idea of, look, not only is there land on the other side, but all these sacred artifacts were brought there, including these arks and everything else. I'm going to go get them for you. And she funded them. And this is the real reason why he put the Templar cross on his boats, because he knew that the natives would recognize it when he got there. Because he knew that the Templars were already traveling over there.
And friendly.
Yeah, already had friendly relations. So it was very easy for him to go in. When the natives saw the Templar cross, they were like, oh, it's our buddies. But then Columbus went in and started enslaving them and bringing them back, and he was terrible about it. So that's the real story behind Columbus, and it's the reason why Columbus and the Spanish that came over afterwards, originally they were looking for these holy artifacts, that the Templars had brought over. They knew the Templars had brought them over. They knew they had associations with the natives. So they had to be somewhere. And then it just turned into a lust for gold, after
Right.
that. So,
But the Spanish clearly had an interest in the supernatural elements by going after the Fountain of Youth and the
course.
Lost City of Z.
that's exactly
Right.
right. Yeah, but it was all tied into these kind of Grail legends,
Yes.
that were tied in with these artifacts. And the Templars did. They did bring these artifacts like the arks. So this kind of goes back into the artifacts. They brought these arks and other things over to the New World, and they did establish relations with certain tribes who helped to protect and continue to this day to protect and preserve them. So we have a series of vaults that we set up to hide these artifacts in. And some of the other artifacts,
Now I have to ask you, where are the vaults?
I can't tell you that.
Right. So, folks, he's not going to tell us.
But I will say that there was originally 7 vaults. There's only 2 now.
So since you can't say where they are,
Yeah.
can you describe what they look like? Are they guarded? Are they climate controlled? What is a vault like?
It's just like a big underground vault that was originally covered over with cement made of like crushed lime and shells, and then dirt and just buried. It was buried in specific areas.
Are they guarded or are they hidden?
I'll tell you this. I'll say I can tell you this much. One of the vaults is in Washington, D.C.
Wow, I have not heard you say that before.
Yeah, I have never said it before.
Okay.
But it's at an area that I think most people wouldn't expect. And it's on national park property.
I might want to slow you down there.
Well,
Okay.
there's no way for people to get to it. So that it's protected. And even the Park Service doesn't even know it's there. I mean, we have people who watch it and make sure it's, not being broken into, but it's in an area people wouldn't expect.
We're not trusting the American government for security.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No way. So, but it is in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
The other vault is actually in Montana,
Okay.
at an area in Montana, which we haven't said before either. But in fact, Lewis and Clark, when they did their excursion, when they were doing their trip up there, one of the things they were checking on was that vault. When Jefferson sent them up there, they were checking on that vault. That was one of the things they were checking on. That was part of their mission.
Jefferson a Mason?
He was a Templar.
He was a Templar.
Yeah.
So he knew.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's some speculation he was also a Mason.
Okay.
I mean, that's debated because there's no records of his initiation, but when he died, there was a Masonic funeral held for him. He was known to have also attended the Lodge of Nine Muses in France, which he wouldn't have been allowed to do unless he was a Mason. He had nephews who were named after him, who were all Freemasons. And there were Masonic codes that were found amongst his writings. He wouldn't have known all that unless he was involved. And he was a Templar. And of course, when Lewis and Clark were sent, they were Masons, and they were trading aprons with some of the tribes. Why would that be? It's because those connections were already established centuries before. In fact, anytime you encounter a tribe that uses the red equal arm cross or the cross of Lorraine, which is archaeologists say, it was their way of depicting a firefly, or not a dragonfly. Well, no, it wasn't. It was actually a cross of Lorraine because it was a Templar symbol.
Sure.
So these were all tribes that had established connections with the Templars already. And so anyhow, one of these tribes continues to protect one of the vaults up in Montana. So those connections are still there. But at one point in time, there used to be 7 vaults, one of which was actually on Oak Island. And that's what the whole Oak Island mystery is.
Sure.
But we cleared that out in 1765. And this is going to be a bummer for people who watch the show, but we our records say we cleared that out in 1765 in preparation for the American Revolutionary War. Because we already knew that we were going to have to do that war to establish the United States as a free state, and from England, where these freedoms could be perpetuated. And Benjamin Franklin was actually one of the people in charge of making sure that vault was cleared out to gain the money and resources, because a lot of the gold had to be melted down to be used to fund the revolution.
Sure.
So that was a whole nother thing. So there were other than the arks, there were other artifacts. One of the things that was discovered in East Jerusalem, in the area, it's now referred to as the Talpiot tomb. There was a tomb in East Jerusalem that was discovered that had ossuaries in it. And these ossuaries contained the bones of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, John the Baptist, and their children. And I say their children because it was according to our records, Templar records, Mary Magdalene was married to John the Baptist prior to Jesus, and that they had children. And when John the Baptist died, when he was killed, Jesus then took on the responsibilities of John the Baptist.
Because John was the earlier Messiah.
Right, exactly. And Mary was the financier. She was a very rich woman. In fact, her name, Magdalene, comes from Magdal, which meant tower. And it was she was the woman of this tower. She had a lot of wealth. And so she was funding John the Baptist, and he was meant to be the original Messiah figure. And then when he was killed, Jesus took on that role.
I want to ask you about that. I want to set this up just for those listening, because it's an extraordinary claim. In 1945, the Gospel of Philip was found in ancient Egypt, which Mary Magdalene is featured very heavily and considered Jesus' favorite disciple.
Right.
There's even a passage of them
kissing. Right. Yeah, he used to kiss her on the mouth.
Yes.
It says, and these were, and by the way, again, when the Templars were doing all of that research in Egypt 1,000 years ago, they discovered some of these clay jars, Nag Hammadi, where all the Nag Hammadi scrolls were found.
Right.
That's about 5 minutes from the Valley of the Kings. It's right next to it. People don't realize it is right there.
I didn't know that.
And so all of that research that the Templars were doing in Luxor, which is just right outside of the Valley of the Kings, and then they were going into these tombs in the Valley of the Kings. They were going into that whole area of Nag Hammadi, and they found some of these texts, which is also part of what they brought over to the New World, and it supported their Gnostic belief system that the Templars were secretly practicing at the time.
And Gnosticism is
it comes from the word gnosis, which means divine revelatory knowledge, and it was the belief that anybody through their own efforts could tap into this universal consciousness that was referred to as the Christos. And so rather than Christ being the last name of Jesus, like I think many people think Jesus Christ is like his last name, Jesus when he was speaking as the Christ, he was speaking as this universal consciousness.
It could be argued that he was a Gnostic in a sort of way.
100%. And not only that, but according to our Templar belief, Mary Magdalene was quite possibly a priestess of the Isis tradition of Egypt. And Mary Magdalene represented what was known as the Sophia, which was wisdom, the goddess of wisdom. And according to the early Gnostic tradition, Sophia was the bride of the Christ, just like Mary Magdalene was the bride of Jesus. So Jesus represented the Christos. Mary Magdalene represented the Sophia. And their story was really the story of the spiritual journey of every person who incarnates on this planet, who is a soul, who incarnates into matter, who gets lost in it, eventually works their way out of it. They come to marry or unite with the universal consciousness, and that's where the escape is from this prison planet.
Sure.
Right?
Or we're here to learn, have experiences, and bring it back to the Christos.
Exactly. Yep. So that's Gnosticism in a real nutshell. I mean, there was a belief, the Gnostics believed that this planet is a prison planet until you wake up. And then once you wake up, you can choose to incarnate back here to help wake other people up, to help other people escape the cave, from the Plato metaphor. Or you could choose to just continue to reincarnate to have experiences, or you could also choose to not reincarnate anymore and to exist in a different realm of light that's beyond this dimension.
Well, we have got about 10 minutes left for the next break, and I want to get into Gnosticism, alchemy, and all of that, Emerald Tablet.
Yeah.
But let's finish up with the bones. Where
did
you find them? How do we know?
So the Templar Order, they've discovered this tomb clear back during the Crusades that was known as the Talpiot tomb, and they removed all the bones from these ossuaries, and they took them. They, again, same routes. They brought them into to Paris and to Scotland, and then eventually over into the New World, and they put them in these vaults. And then back in the 1980s, this tomb was rediscovered, where they found the boxes, the ossuaries that had the names on them, but the bones were missing. And it's because the bones had already been removed clear back during the Middle Ages. And not only were the bones removed at that time, but the Templars put 3 skulls in the east, the west, and the south of the tomb as kind of symbolic guardians of the tomb, and they buried it under a rose garden. So it was under the rose, and that's really where that term sub rosa comes from.
It's beautiful.
Which was the secret knowledge.
So why not test the bones? Why not release that information?
We haven't had the technology to do that till recently.
Right. So now we do.
So the hope is, we've been hanging on to these things for centuries now. We're finally at a point where not only do we have the technology to test them, but we have the technology to reveal them all to the world at once.
Now, how much responsibility and weight do you feel about that?
Quite a bit, but it's time. We've always been wanting to build up to this time where we could have a world community where people have the freedom to explore other ideas, and for the last 40 years, We've been trying to get information out there to break down the conditioning, because people have all kinds of cultural conditioning and beliefs.
Well, Jesus resurrected bodily to heaven, so this...
Yeah, so this interferes with that idea. But again, remember, that's a conditioning that the church has perpetuated. From a Gnostic standpoint, the Gnostics believed in reincarnation.
True.
So it's not a problem for the idea that Jesus could have died and could reincarnate.
I have quite a few people in my audience who are uncomfortable with this story.
Sure.
Can you put them at ease?
Sure, absolutely. So another example of this in the Bible of reincarnation, beyond the idea of being born again, right? Everyone thinks born again is the symbolic thing. Well, not necessarily. It could literally mean being born again. And but there's also passages like in the Standard Gospel, like when the disciples go to, there's a great passage where the disciples go to Jesus and they say, Jesus, the people are saying that the prophet Elias has returned, and Elias is just the Greek word for Elijah, right? So the Hebrew Elijah is the Greek Elias. So
Elijah, by the way, also went bodily to heaven.
Correct, but it says people are saying that the prophet Elias or Elijah has returned, and Jesus says he has. But it's in a new form that the people don't fully recognize yet. And then it says, then the disciples understood he was talking about John the Baptist.
Mm.
Well, we know who John the Baptist's parents were.
Mm-hmm.
So that means if Elijah is returning as John the Baptist, it has to be he's reincarnating.
Right.
Right? So there's an example right there in the New Testament of reincarnation.
I would assume that the Vatican does not like any of this.
No,
Okay.
because the Vatican would rather have you believe you have one life, and the only way to get to heaven is through them. Right, which is good business.
Sure.
Right? I mean, they'll also have you believe that it doesn't matter what sins you commit, but if you believe in Jesus, you do the crime, Jesus will do the time.
That's right.
So you can still get to heaven. Whereas the Gnostics said, no, you are personally responsible for your own salvation, and your salvation comes from awakening. And that part of that awakening is to your own personal responsibility. So you do the crime, you do the penance to make up for the crime.
Last question. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
From what I understand, to be a Mason in your 32nd degree,
Correct.
To be initiated, you need to believe in a higher power.
Correct.
Do you?
Absolutely. 100%. I believe in God or Source or Allah or
The universe,
whatever you want to call it.
The great source?
The great source,
Right.
the origin. And from a Gnostic, I consider myself a Gnostic. We believe that the supreme God comes from a realm of light that is beyond this matter, but there's a seed of that light within everybody. And part of what Jesus came back to do was he was a great exemplar. He wasn't coming as a savior. He was coming to give the example of how to live and how to bring that light outside of ourselves so that we can, and that, by the way, that light is within everybody, of all faiths, of all religions. And all religions were started through a Gnostic experience, a revelation.
Certainly.
And so then that person became the prophet that started those religions, but that they're all telling the same story and they're all pointing to the same source, and we are all connected by that light. And this is why the Templars believed in freedoms come from God. And they come from that source. And that this is why they also believed in democracy.
Sure.
Right? Because it's inherently within us. And so we all have that right to have a say.
So when Jesus was performing miracles.
Yeah. And he said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, these miracles you see me perform, ye shall do also, and those even greater than these." He was being an exemplar for it, and that we all have that potential within us. We all have the potential to heal. We all have the potential to awaken to this higher consciousness.
And that would be sort of my message to anyone who's uncomfortable with this is Jesus, I think, gave us a great gift with what he's passed down.
Yeah.
And with the Templars continuing that message. Let's take one last break and then got to talk about Atlantis. I'm so excited.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
I've been following your work for a long time. You know I'm a fan. Just to tell the audience, when I did my Knights Templar episode, Tim was kind enough to trade a few emails with me and really enlighten me in a lot of things. And I've been a fan ever since, because this is a very, very kind man. No matter, you could believe his claims, you don't have to believe them. This is a storytelling podcast. I love this story. And one of my favorite stories of all is Atlantis, Anunnaki, and all of that. So watching you contribute with Randall Carlson has been very exciting.
Randall's great.
So Atlantis, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so definitely from a Templar perspective, we believe that the Templar story is, look, Atlantis was this advanced civilization. It was a worldwide network. There's some debate about where that center of activity was. Randall certainly believes it was in the Azores. For a long time, the Templar Order believed it was in the Azores. In fact, that's the whole reason why Portugal is in control of the Azores, right? Because Portugal, again, was founded as a Templar state initially.
Sure.
And so that was all part of that.
I think some of Plato's writings lines up with that.
It does. And Randall does a great job of showing all that. But, you know, when it collapsed, we believe it was right when Plato said it was, which was 9,000 years before him, which was right at the Younger Dryas cataclysm.
Sure.
We know that the ice shelves, there's 3 miles of ice that went from the North Pole all the way down to Chicago in North America. But you also found this in Europe, and it all melted rapidly.
You believe in the impact theory?
Yeah,
okay.
I do. I think, so, you know, there's two theories out there. One is that it was solar flare. Robert Schoch suggests that. The other is that it was more of a comet fragments that broke up and hit the ice sheets. Graham Hancock certainly pushes that one.
I'm torn, but
it could be both.
Yeah, it could be both.
I used to work for the space labs up in Boulder, Colorado, and we created a satellite that was called the Advanced Composition Explorer satellite, or the ACE satellite, and it still exists. It is it sits at what's known as the L1 point, between where the gravity of the Earth and the gravity of the Sun is equal. So it just sits there in space, and it looks at the Sun 24/7.
Right, Lagrange points.
Yeah, and what it's looking for is solar flares, so that we have an early warning detection system.
Those terrify me.
Right, because in all probability, we may have another. There was a Carrington event back in the 1800s.
Yep.
And it just fried all. There was a solar flare. It fried all the telegraph cables.
Sure. Set them on fire, electrocuted operators.
But that was pretty much the extent of it. You know,
right.
I mean, there wasn't an infrastructure based on electricity back then. If that same event were to happen today, the government estimates that within 2 months, 80% of the population will be dead.
No question.
Because everything we depend on. I mean, you're not going to be able to use your computers, your phones, your cars, everything, pumps that pump water and sewage, those will stop working. It'll be a mess, right? And it will happen at some point.
Sure.
What we found, though, also when I was working there at the space labs, is when we enter into areas where there's more cosmic debris that's hitting the Earth, that same debris is going into the sun, which is also fueling more solar flares.
Right.
So it could be both. We could have had these cosmic fragments that were hitting the ice caps, and they were also going into the sun, triggering more solar flares at the same time. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be both. But what we do know is, regardless of what was triggering it the most at the Younger Dryas, it was melting the ice caps rapidly. Sea levels rose 300 feet. This is the reason why, for example, this is what formed the Great Lakes in the United States. It's what the separation of like England from the rest of Europe, for example, that English Channel, that's when that was formed. You can look at the bottom of the English Channel this day. There's still the foundations of houses down there because that was all above water.
I didn't know that.
Time. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So it's all, it just caused mass flooding, mass cataclysm. And if there was a civilization as advanced as we are today, there's nothing of it that would have survived. If the same thing were to happen today, there's nothing we've created that would have survived 10,000 years from now. So, so from a Templar perspective, what happened was the cataclysm occurred in stages, and we'll just call them the Atlanteans. They sent out pockets of survival into certain places where they tried to bring their technology and their knowledge where it could be preserved.
Did they know that this was coming?
They knew it was coming on some level, and they couldn't stop it.
Right.
And according to Plato, they were greedy and whatever else, and so their selfishness and their narcissism led to them fighting with each other to not be able to develop what they needed to do to survive it anyways.
But he might have added that.
As
a political
moral
statement.
thing.
Yeah,
of course. So because there's always a moral story, but under it is also hidden deeper truths. You find that in the story of Noah too. To give an example, in the story of Noah, the earth is obsessed with its physical senses. Along comes a flood, right? And then Noah lets birds go into the air to test if there's land somewhere. Eventually, after 40 days and 40 nights, he lands on Mount Ararat, and he makes a burnt sacrifice to God. Well, these stages correspond to alchemical stages of earth is associated with physical association. Water was associated with emotions and was kind of the next stage of alchemical work, was associated with digestion. Air was the next stage, which Noah lets birds go into the air. And then fire was the last stage, and calcination. And Mount Ararat is a Sanskrit word that means illuminated one, right? So contained within this story of this cataclysm was actually this secret science, you know, of awakening. And so that's what these ancient myths used to do. They used to incorporate both sacred knowledge and history, but in a story, that could be any child could, enjoy, So but because there were all these myths, these same flood myths all over the world. I mean, the Templars figured that out pretty quick. So they figured out there must be something to this. And so the Templar Order, according to the secret tradition, the Templar Order was secretly founded to go regain the technologies and any lost knowledge that was being preserved from this pre-Diluvian civilization.
Did they find any?
They did. They found the arks, they found manuscripts, and they found secret knowledge. And more importantly, they found that the initiation rites that they were passing on, which involved, amongst other things, a symbolic death or killing of a candidate and raising them back from the dead, which represented not only the person dying to their old self and waking up to their new self, but it also represented that civilization that had collapsed and then needed to be raised again. But there was a secret hand grip that was given during this raising. And they found that this secret initiation ceremony was being preserved in the same manner all over the world, ancient world, at certain areas. The ancient Egyptians were practicing it. The Mayans were practicing it. The Druze were practicing it.
Even though they're supposed to have no contact.
Even though they were supposed to have no
Right.
contact with you. It was the exact same initiation ceremony and the exact same secret handshake.
Did those ceremonies involve alchemy?
They did, yeah. So alchemy was another big part of it, right? Because alchemy was this was believed to be the science of Atlantis. The colors of Atlantis were black, red, and white, which are the colors of the alchemical process. Literally the transformations that go from black to red to white.
Right.
When you're doing the alchemical work. And
what are the colors of the Knights Templar?
black, red, and white. What are the colors of the flag of Egypt?
Black,
red, and white.
Yeah.
What were the colors of ancient Egypt? Black, red, and white.
Yeah.
You know.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean it was all the same thing. And and it was all in the science of alchemy, which by the way comes from the word alchem or alchemit. Chem or Kemet was the ancient name for Egypt. So it was the land of Chem, or the land of Kemet was this land that was preserving this knowledge. And so alchemy comes from that. And the Templars were figuring this out. They were passing it on. There were three main stages in the alchemical process. The first was digestion, where you took whatever you were working on, whether it be a metal or a herb, and you put it in a liquid that would break it down. This was also associated with baptism. It was called baptism by water. Right?
Yes.
After which it would change and it would turn black. When it did this, it was known as caput mortem, which means deadhead. All right, so let's talk about John the Baptist for a minute. What did he do? Baptized with water.
Yes.
And then what happened to him? Got his head cut off.
That's right.
Dead head, caput mortem, right? First stage of the alchemical process. Then the next stage was distillation, where the liquid, you would heat it and it would turn into a steam. And then you could collect that steam and it would have within it the volatile chemicals, whether it be oils from an herb or oils from like a gold chloride or something, you know, a metal that had been broken down by acids as opposed to by water or alcohol. So that was the second stage associated with air, and it was always represented by birds in alchemical texts. And then the last stage was calcination, or fire, where you burnt the original material down to its ashes and you extract the secret salts out of them, which was the hidden mana or these monoatomics.
Yep.
Right? And then you could combine these processes together to create this new elixir that was more potent than the original thing you started with, right? And that's how you create all medicines are created this way, but all metallic transmutations are created this way too. So, and the original thing you were working on was associated with earth. The digestion was associated with water or liquids. The distillation was associated with air. And then calcination was associated with fire. And these were the you started with earth, and then you went to liquid, gas, and plasma states, basically. And this was all part of the alchemical process. And you find this even in the myths of Osiris, the god Osiris. You know, in the story, he's first he's depicted as green, which represented green vegetation. He's chopped up. He's thrown into the Nile, which is the water stage.
Right.
Right. Isis then goes to find him. She turns herself into a bird, starts flying around him. That was distillation. That was the air stage. And then she lights oil lamps and incense, puts them back together, and raises them, right, to a new form.
Right.
Well, that's the alchemical process.
Sure.
It's the same with the story of Noah. Earth is obsessed with its physical senses. Along comes a flood, water. He lets go birds, distillation. He lands on Mount Ararat, makes a burnt sacrifice to God, calcination. It's the same science being depicted in all of these ancient texts, and the people that were passing on these stories were preserving these alchemical sciences.
Well, you said something really interesting so we have white, black, and red. I believe those are the color stages of the Philosopher's Stone.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. So the Philosopher's Stone was just, you go through those stages so technically the entire alchemical process, it turns black, red, white, and then black, red, white again, and then black, red, white a third time, and then you basically you've purified it these different ways and extracted what you needed at each stage to create this Philosopher's Stone.
Sure,
that was the idea behind it.
And before people roll your eyes, Isaac Newton spent most of his time pursuing this.
85% of everything Newton wrote on had to do with alchemy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was just the 15% was on gravity or whatever. But even that was tied into alchemy. He was noticing that there were under the, when he zoomed down on the elements and metals, he found that there was these secret forces that were acting, which we now recognize as like covalent bonds and stuff that were forming between things. But there were these secret forces that were that he could see under the microscope, and he also saw those same secret forces happening between the planets above. So he rationalized, according to the Emerald Tablet, as above, so below, that there was a force that was happening both on the upper and on the lower.
Sure.
And he was trying to understand what that force was, and so that's how he developed gravity. But
wasn't he working off a translation of the Emerald
Yeah,
Tablet?
yeah. In fact, he had his own translation of it. He has it in my book, Alchemical Keys to Masonic Ritual. I actually have Isaac Newton's translation of the Emerald Tablet in it.
I'd love to read that.
It's also in my book, Novo Clavis Esoterica.
We'll put all that stuff up.
But it's yeah, that's what Newton was doing. And by the way, in that stage of the alchemical process, there's a certain point where, whether you're working with metals like gold or whether you're working with herbs, where you are trying to extract the secret salts out, this hidden mana, these monoatomics, there's a certain point where it turns yellow, very yellow, and it looks like piss.
Yes.
And the alchemists called this the alchemist's urine.
I mean, this is part of the legend.
This is why everyone thought that you had to extract it out of urine.
That's what I thought.
Right, but it's not actual urine.
Oh.
It's philosophical urine. It's the alchemists described what things looked like, not what they actually were. So it looked like urine, so they called it urine, or same reason why they called, when they first started digesting an herb and it would start to turn reddish, they called it menstruum. But it wasn't actual menstruum. So it wasn't. And I watched your great episode on the Emerald Tablet and the discovery of phosphorus and that came out of that. But it was the true urine had nothing to do with urine.
Thank goodness.
It had to do with it looked like urine.
So all those people on those forums that were collecting their urine, they made a terrible mistake.
Terrible mistake. Yeah, I mean, there are some people that believe that their pineal gland is excreting melatonin, but also dimethyltryptamine, DMT.
Sure.
And that it gets collected in the urine so that they could extract that out of the urine.
Oh, I never heard that. I'm not going to try that one.
But that's not. I would not recommend that. I mean, the true urine that the alchemists were referring to was it's a stage in the process where it looks like urine, but it's not really urine. It's that's just what it looks like.
Who found the Emerald Tablet, and does that connect to the Templars?
So originally the Emerald Tablet was said to be found. So it was written by Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great, and it was said to be discovered.
Let's stop there for just a second, because Hermes Trismegistus. So that's Hermes and I think and Osiris together. Yes.
Well, it's kind of so the story of Osiris, as I just mentioned, was an alchemical metaphor. It was also the story of Atlantis, right? Where it was originally the civilization. It got chopped up, sent out. Isis, which by the way, her name means throne or power. Osiris's name in Egyptian is Osar. It was the Greek that named him Osiris, but his original name in ancient Egyptian is Osar, and the us part of it means Isis. And it means throne, because that's where the power comes from.
Right.
And then the Sar was his part. And by the way, Sar is where we get the word sir and sire from.
Okay.
But the throne was Isis, so the seat of power was Isis. So she goes and collects the pieces, brings them back together, resurrects them. And that's the story of Egypt.
Right. And Hermes is the god of writing and knowledge.
Right, writing knowledge. He was in ancient Egyptian, he was Thoth or Tahuti.
Right, Thoth, yes.
Yep. So and by the way, that story of Osiris also symbolically represented from a Gnostic standpoint. It represents the path that we all go through, where we come into this world, we incarnate, we see everything in pieces. They're as separate. And it's only when we're able to put them all back together again into the oneness that we have the understanding of that we're all a part of this universal intelligence.
This is why I need you here for 8 hours.
Yeah. So that's another side. But so the Osiris myth represented all these things, right?
Okay.
And the pharaohs used to go through an initiation rite where they would be symbolically killed, like Osiris, and then brought back. And by the way, this is what Templars believe Jesus was doing with Lazarus. He was initiating him, because in Hebrew, Lazarus is El Asur. Well, El is the Egyptian article for God, and Asur was the ancient Egyptian name for the god Osiris. And he was raised in Bethany, or in Hebrew, Beth Anu. Beth means house in Hebrew, and Anu was the ancient Egyptian abode of the dead.
Right.
So you literally had Jesus raising the god Osiris in the house of the dead, which was either a metaphor or it was an initiation rite. And we think it was an initiation rite because Templars continue to do that same initiation rite. And we're not the only ones. The Mayans continue to this day do that same initiation rite. And you're raised by the same grip, the same hand grip. And that's how when the Templars went over and met with the Mayans, they were able to give them this hand grip. And they recognized it.
Yep.
The Hopi, they recognized this same hand grip. They say this hand grip was given to them right before the last shaking of the earth. And it was given so that everyone, all the high priesthoods, the high shaman would all recognize each other again.
That's fascinating.
We came back together.
Because the Hopi also have a legend about the ant people coming out of the caves.
That's right. Who had brought them underground right before the shaking of the earth.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same cataclysmic myths, but the Druze of Lebanon, they have this same grip that they're giving in their initiations. The Sufi have this same grip. This same grip can be found within the Kabbalistic traditions of the Judaic Kabbalistic traditions. So it is all associated with this symbolic death and raising ritual. And the fact that all these different cultures separated are practicing it and have the exact same grip suggests it all goes back to the same source. I was down in the Yucatan years ago, and I was meeting with the Mayan, and we give this grip to this day. I still participate when we do our tours. I'll allow them to participate in these ceremonies down there, and they'll do them. The Mayans will do these ceremonies for us because of my association with them. And but they had these. They took me to this. They had recently taken apart this pyramid in order to use the stones to build fencing, which is kind of a sad commentary.
It is,
but. When they disassembled the pyramid, they found all these artifacts in them that they kind of put into a mobile home unit and turned it into a museum. And the figures are performing this initiation rite.
Amazing.
And I asked them, I said, well, how old are these figurines? Do you know? And yeah, they'd actually been carbon dated to about 900 AD. Well, that's before the Templars ever existed.
Right.
It's before any European ever went over to, that we know of, went over into the Yucatan. But the fact that they were practicing it back at least that far, again, suggests it's a tradition they inherited. And they say they inherited it from Atlan.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in short order that the mainstream archaeology is going to become the fringe archaeology, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We only have about 20 minutes left, so let's get back to the Hermetica and the Emerald Tablet.
So the Emerald Tablet, supposedly it was originally discovered in Siwa in Egypt. According to tradition, Apollonius of Tyana discovered it. According to Templar tradition, Apollonius of Tyana was actually the Apostle Paul, and that Paul just is short for Apollonius, which just means little Apollo.
Right.
And that but that's a whole nother discussion. But supposedly he discovered this tablet, and at the grave of Hermes or Thoth, because again, Hermes was Thoth or Tahuti in the ancient Egyptian, and continued to pass it on. Now, what's interesting from a Nag Hammadi. So Nag Hammadi in Egypt is where all these earliest fragments of the Gospels were discovered in these clay jars.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that they found in those clay jars were a bunch of Hermetic texts, which means that these early Christians were revering Hermetic texts
Sure.
just as much as the Gospels.
Sure. I mean, I'm assuming most people know, but maybe not. But the Bible there was a lot of controversy what books would go in and come out.
Right, correct. Yeah, and some of those early fragments became part of the standard Gospels, and some of them didn't. I mean, at the Council of Nicaea, they were removed. In 325. So
the Gnostic texts were not going to make it in there.
Yeah, and a lot of the Gnostic texts just weren't going to make it in because they painted a different perspective. But those Gnostic texts were in line with the Hermetic texts. And one of the things we have to understand about Hermeticism in general, and the Emerald Tablet falls into this as well. It talks about as above, so below. And it says that all was created by the meditation of the One, and it all goes back to the one mind. Well, Hermeticists believe that, look, if you're the creator of all that is, say there's nothing around you to create with, because you're all that is, right? You're the singular intelligence. The only way that you could create is within your own mind. And therefore, everything that we see around us that we think is real and solid and everything else is just mind stuff. It's the mind of the creator.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, 20th century physicists told us this. I mean, people like Maxwell Planck and Heisenberg and others, they all said the more they look at the foundation blocks of matter, the more they appears that we're living in a mind. It's all mind stuff.
Sure. If you can explain the collapse of the wave function, then go get your Nobel Prize.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But it's completely in line with the Hermetic text.
Sure.
And of course, this is completely in line with the things Jesus was saying too. You know, I mean, this is how you would perform the miracles. Because if your mind is a part of the greater mind, and all matter, so-called matter, is just made up of mind stuff.
What language is the tablet in, and who created it?
So supposedly this original Emerald Tablet, which has never been found, but has been translated over the centuries, was written in Phoenician.
Oh, okay.
So Phoenician, the thing we have to understand about Phoenician is the Phoenicians were basically the cousins of the Egyptians. In fact, even Osiris, when his body finally the parts of his body were reassembled, it was in Byblos, which was a Phoenician city, right? But the Phoenicians, and by the way, if you look at the hieroglyphs for the letters, the simple letters, the standard letters, not like complex hieroglyphs that explain different concepts, but like actual letter forms. You look at the Egyptian hieroglyphs, for example, the Egyptian hieroglyph for the letter M is an owl, right? And if you look at the Phoenician letter for the letter M, it looks like the head of that owl. And you take the Phoenician and you take it into the Hebrew, the Hebrew letter mem. It's just a re-emphasis of that Phoenician letter M.
Yep.
So you can trace the Egyptian hieroglyphs to the Phoenician to the Hebrew very easily.
Yep.
And
I don't think that's controversial.
it's not controversial. And that's why a lot of the Egyptian words became Phoenician words, which became Hebrew words. And even to this day. So, but the Emerald Tablet was originally said to be written in this Phoenician language, but was found in Egypt, and supposedly, and then translations of it had been copied for the last several thousand years, going all the way back. Some of the earliest sources were Arabic sources copying it, and then later people like Sir Isaac Newton were making their own translations of it.
Could the Phoenicians have gotten that information from the Atlanteans?
Possibly. I mean, again, the Phoenicians were kind of like the cousins of the Egyptians, and they were both believed to be the same, essentially the same cultures. They even had the same gods. I mean, like Thoth or Tahuti of ancient Egypt was Tuat of the Phoenicians. So it was, and the Egyptians, even the Phoenicians, said that their chief god was known as El Elyon, which just was this god of light. And this same El Elyon was probably the Aten of the Egyptians, that was the secret one god, that all the gods were said to be a part of, and in the same way, even today, like within Christianity, we have the archangels, but if you break down the names of the archangels, like Uriel, for example, El means God. So Uriel means the light of God. Raphael means God heals.
Right.
Gabriel means the strength of God.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Michael means is like God. So they're all aspects of God.
Sure.
Right? They're just like, so if you want to pray to the healing aspect of God, you pray to Raphael, because that means God heals. Right? So Raphael is the archangel that delivers the message that you need healing to God, according to standard modern Christian theology. But if you really break down the Hebrew roots, it's like these are their own beings, but they're aspects of God. In the same way, ancient Egyptians believed that the different Nibiru, the different gods, were aspects of the one God, And that was the great secret that Akhenaten revealed and then got in trouble for.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So you've got a tour coming up in March.
Yeah, end of March, beginning of April to Egypt.
What are we going to see that you can't see if you go on?
Yeah, so if you go on our tours, we go to all the major temples in Egypt. And so we start out at Giza, and we start to go to the temples around Giza, and then we fly to Luxor, and we see Luxor and Karnak, and then and Aswan and
Osirian.
Yeah, we go to the Osirian at Abydos, and we have a lot of tourists. If you go to these places, you can kind of look over them, like the Sphinx. There's a kind of a lookout point where you can look down at the Sphinx, but you're not allowed to actually go into the Sphinx enclosure. But our tour has access to everything. So we can actually go into these areas. We can go into the Sphinx. We can go into the Osirian. There are secret areas in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera that are closed to the public, but we have access to them, so we actually go into them. And then the trip culminates back at Giza, and we have the Great Pyramid to ourselves the last night. They kick all the tourists off the Giza Plateau. We get a military escort to the Great Pyramid. They guard it for the night for us. And for those people who are interested in the Templar path, we'll initiate them.
Well, you can
in the pyramid.
You could petition to become a Templar?
Correct. Yeah. So we have a pre-study body known as the Templar Collegia, and anyone could go to that. It's templarcollegia.org. It's $40.
Okay.
You apply for $40 or $50, something like that. We do a background check. As long as everything looks good, we send you your first study material. It's a 1,000-page book. It's called the Codex, and it's all the fundamental information that we feel like you need to know as a Templar.
I'm buying it today.
Yeah, it's great. and then there's a second Codex, Volume 2, too, after you've studied that. But so we get people starting to study that. But if they go on our tour, we'll also initiate them in the Great Pyramid.
Unbelievable.
And we're the only group that's allowed to do this because we've been doing it for the last 1,000 years. And we do it in the way that was always traditionally done.
Has Zahiwas ever gotten in your way?
No.
Okay.
No. We came close in 2011. We were doing initiations in there, but it was during the Arab Spring.
Right.
And Mubarak had just gotten deposed, and Zahiwas had just gotten fired.
Right.
And that's a whole nother story.
Sure.
That, we don't need to get into right now, but we'd almost had run into some problems then. And then there was about a 10-year period where we couldn't do it because things were too unstable in Egypt. But they're fine now. And when we travel on these tours, we have armed guards with us from the Egyptian government who make sure that we're all okay the entire trip. And, we set it up where we have private time in all these temples. We go to the Temple of Horus at Edfu, for example. We show you where the Atlantis myth is inscribed on the building, or the legend of Utlant.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Egyptian name for it is, Utlant. And so probably when Solon, Plato's great-great-great-grandfather, talked about the Atlantis myth. I mean, he was learning about Utlant, and he just called it Utlantis, and that's how it came to Plato. But we show you where Utlant is written on the temple wall, and it shows all the neaters and boats coming to Egypt to set things up, and they have with them an ark on the boat. And there's actually a replica of one of those arks in the Temple of Horus and that's closed to the public, but we actually have access to that as well. So you can go in and actually see the chamber and see the ark. It's a replica, but it's still there.
I would love the influence of the Knights to get us digging in the Hawara Labyrinth.
Yes. I've known about that I first went there with Robert Bouval back in 2010, 2011, and we were scoping that whole area out. It's been known about for a long time.
Well, since ancient.
Yeah, exactly.
Herodotus.
Yeah, and there's still there's statues poking out of the ground and everything there. It's pretty amazing.
But there's that metal ring down there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's. There's a couple things that still need to be dug up in Egypt. That's one of them. There's also an area we go to on our tour called Elephantine Island, and Elephantine Island looks like a bomb went off on it, but it's where there used to be a very early Jewish temple on that island. There's a temple of Tutmosis III there. Elephantine Island was like the museum for the ancient Egyptians, where they brought all of their discoveries. It's one of the oldest places in Egypt, and it's closed to the public, but we have access to it. And there is a museum on the island, and they have things like boomerangs, right, that had been preserved there.
Wow.
What were they doing with boomerangs? And by the way, the boomerangs even have kangaroos on them.
What?
Yeah, so it's like clearly the ancient Egyptians
Right.
were traveling to Australia and
Yep.
bringing this stuff back and then preserving it on the island. We also know that there's an ark on Elephantine Island that hasn't been dug up yet.
Oh.
And it's issuing so much energy that it's actually turning the granite into slate on the island, which normally would take thousands of years, but something's doing it. There's so much high energy, it's speeding up that process. So we show that on the island, and we kind of know where the ark is, but they've been digging down to it for the last 60 years. There's some German scientists right now who are in charge of all that. So, but again, and by the way, on the island, there's also vegetation that you find. It's the only place in Egypt where you find this vegetation, and it's vegetation from the New World, from the Yucatan.
Amazing.
Right? Which again proves something, they're bringing things back, growing it there. And there's temples too. There's even a temple that has a mural of Egyptians meeting with Mayans on it, on this island, and we show that.
There's no question. There's DNA evidence that
Yeah,
these
yeah,
people's...
right.
One
So-
last time, Tim, where can we find you online, learn more about you? You have 7 books?
Yeah, 7 books. You can find all my books on Amazon.
Okay.
If you just Google Timothy Hogan, you'll find them. You can also find them at Lulu Press. You can find there's a Timothy Hogan page that has all my books. If you are interested in the tours, you can search for Templar Travel Tours. That's my company. Next year we're doing. We have a Egypt trip, we have a Mexico trip, and we have a UK trip. And each of these areas we explore not only the Atlantean connection, but the Templar connection with this stuff. And we prove on the tour, so you can see for yourself these Templar connections at these areas.
Can't wait.
And then the other company that I do that you can find me you can go to templarcollegia.org. That's where, if you're interested in potentially starting the study and becoming a Templar, you can go there, and we can start you on that process. And then finally, if you look up Neurabuddha or Templar Made. Templar Made is my company where we manufacture monoatomic gold.
Okay.
And we make that available to the public too.
But not with urine.
But not with urine.
Okay.
There's no urine involved. Yeah. Even though there's a stage in the process that's called the urine stage because it looks like urine, but it's not. It's actually gold chloride, which looks like urine.
Tim Hogan, this has been a treat, a joy.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
it's been a super joy for me. I love the work that you do, and I'm so thankful that you brought me on here.
Please come back anytime.
I would love to do that.
All
We have a lot more we can talk about.
So much. All right.
Yeah.
Have a great time. Bye, everybody.
That was Tim Hogan, who has become one of my favorite people. He's kind, compassionate, and he knows everything about the Knights Templar. But let's break down the conversation. Here's what we know for sure. Tim's credentials check out. He's the Grand Master of the Order of the Temple of the Secret Initiates. His family history with Freemasonry and the Templars is documented. General Joseph Warren is real. The Denver airport connections are real. His father was mayor of Aurora. The standard Templar history he laid out, 1118 to 1307, the banking system, Friday the 13th, Jacques de Molay's execution. That's all historical record, so there's no issues there. As for the big claims, Tim talks about the Younger Dryas cataclysm wiping out an advanced civilization. Well, that was fringe science until pretty recently. A 2024 study from the University of South Carolina found shocked quartz evidence supporting the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis that a massive comet, possibly 50 miles wide, struck the Earth about 12,900 years ago. The mainstream is catching up on this one, and I'm on board. As for monoatomic gold as a superconductor, that's another piece of pseudoscience that's becoming not so pseudo. There's actually a 2024 peer-reviewed paper in the Beni Suef University Journal examining gold warmus in relation to superconductivity research. Now, Tim sells this stuff on his website. I can't vouch for it, but I can't debunk it. Purchase and consume at your own risk. Now, the ark as an electrical capacitor? Well, the Jewish Bible Quarterly published an academic paper on exactly this theory. The gold-wood-gold construction mirrors a Leyden jar. The science tracks, even if the application is speculative. Now, if you watch my episode on the Ark, I break down how this works scientifically. And during our conversation, we mentioned that Isaac Newton spent most of his time on alchemy. Well, that's true. Indiana University's Chemistry of Isaac Newton project documents that he wrote about 1 million words on alchemy. Francis Bacon's New Atlantis being connected to Rosicrucians. Historian Francis Yates made that argument academically. Now, one claim I couldn't verify. Tim says Harry Truman wrote, "We have discovered an ancient weapon," about the atomic bomb. Now, I searched Truman's actual diary entries from 1945. He calls it the most terrible thing ever discovered, but I couldn't find that specific ancient weapon language anywhere. Now, the big ones. The bones of Jesus in a vault in Washington, D.C. The 6 arks his order claims to have. Well, the Talpiot tomb was discovered in the 1980s. The ossuaries are real. The names are real. DNA testing was done. But whether those were the Jesus and Mary Magdalene, that's a bigger claim than I can process in one sitting. My take is that Tim Hogan is either sitting on secrets that rewrite history, or he's the most committed storyteller I've ever met. What I can't shake is how much of what he says lines up where the actual science is heading. The Younger Dryas impact, the piezoelectric properties of the pyramid's granite, the hermetic roots of modern science. Mainstream research keeps catching up to ideas that used to be fringe. Now, to learn more about Tim, check out his book, The Templar Legacy, on Amazon, or even join him on one of his tours to Egypt or the UK. Check out TemplarTravelTours0.wordpress.com, or easier is search for the Facebook group Templar Travel Tours. I'm actually going to go on one of these. Now remember, Tim's not here to convince you of anything. What you believe is up to you. Either way, it's a heck of a story. Until next time, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated.
In Area 51, a secret code inside the Bible said I would. I love my UFOs and paranormal fun, as well as music, so I'm singing it like I should. But then another conspiracy theory becomes the truth, my friends, and it never ends. No, it never ends. I feel the crap cat and got stuck inside Mel's hole with MK Ultra of being only too aware. Did Stanley Kubrick fake the moon landing alone on a film set, or were the shadow people there? The Roswell aliens just fought the smiling man, I'm told, and his name was Cold. And I can't believe I'm dancing with the fish. Hecklefish on Thursday nights with AJ2, and the Wi-Fi's happening all through the night. All I ever wanted was to just hear the truth, so the Wi-Fi's on repeat all through the night. The Mothman sightings and the solar storm still come to have got the secret city underground. Mysterious number stations, planet Serpo 2, Project Stargate, and what the Dark Watchers found. In a simulation mission, don't you worry though. The Black Knight satellite